So my name is Dr. Miriam Liss, and I'm in the Department of Psychological Science. Thank you for having me here today. And thank you for the iced tea. I might do more of it some point. I guzzled it down pretty quickly.
Then it's really good. So tell us about your current research.
So I'm doing this project this year. So the way the Department of Psychological Science works is that we do, most of the faculty research we do with students. And we do it on these research teams. So I wasn't going to have a research team this year because I had one last year and we kind of take turns. But then I was approached by an alum named Beth Jerome, who graduated way back in 2002, which was my first full year. She was my very first student, and she's subsequently got her PhD and had kids, moved back to Fredericksburg, and now we're good friends. And so we were having lunch, and she was saying how she's going to be doing this teen support group with Mental Health America, and that they were interested in evaluating the group and seeing whether or not it helped the teens, and they wanted to get some data. And would that be something I might want to do? And I was like, well, maybe. That would be interesting for my students. And the mechanism of the support group, they were going to be using a therapeutic technique called acceptance and commitment therapy, which has its own application for teens. But it's a kind of therapy that I'm really interested, that I've recently gotten very interested in. And I've been talking with Beth a lot about, which is different than cognitive behavioral therapy. So cognitive behavioral therapy focuses on changing your thoughts. So it'll say, oh, I'm having a bad thought. I think, oh, I'm so stupid, I'll never get this work done. And cognitive behavioral therapy will say, challenge that thought. That's not a good thought. What's the evidence that you're stupid? Let's have a better thought. Change that thought. Right? Or, let's think of some counter evidence. Right? So cognitive behavioral therapy is all about thought changing. But acceptance and commitment therapy actually takes a different approach. And it's more mindfulness based. So it's instead of saying change your thoughts, it focuses more on just accepting your thoughts, right? So that it focuses less on resisting, right? Because sometimes if you're like, I had a bad thought, that's a bad thought, right? I should change that thought, I'm bad for having that thought. Now you've kind of doubled down on feeling bad about yourself because not only do you have a bad, I can't try to change the thought, but I can't change the thought, right? You start to, it can be challenging, although cognitive behavioral therapy does work. I've been a lot more interested in mindfulness and mindfulness-based approaches to therapy, and so I've been getting more. I've just learned about acceptance and commitment therapy, and she said she was going to do this teen support group using the techniques of acceptance and commitment therapy, and would we like to evaluate it? I was like, okay, I could do that.
Where do you see this research manifesting itself in everyday life? Because I know I'm in a mindfulness class right now, and a lot of the things you're saying too.
Well, it's exactly that. Right. So all of these techniques you'll learn in a mindfulness class, but they won't be framed exactly in the same way. But it's all. The more I've realized, the more I've been reading about this and reading about Buddhism, and I'm like, it's all. Everybody's saying the same thing. This is pretty cool, right? So if you have these skills of being able to be in the present moment and not getting so entangled up in your thoughts, that can be really helpful. So what we finally ended up doing was collecting all this data about risk factors and then outcomes and then these psychological flexibility variables to see how they relate. So one of our risk factors we're looking at is adverse childhood experiences. Those are the ACEs, which is the new hot thing.
So what is ACEs?
So the ACEs are a list. I mean, people have been talking about trauma for a long time, but the ACEs are kind of a pretty easy way of measuring bad things that have happened to people in the first 18 years of their lives. And they were first developed in the 90s. The Kaiser Permanente was actually doing a big study to study how to keep people alive and use fewer health resources, I guess, right? So they studied 20,000 people and they asked all these questions about their experiences in the first 18 years of their lives, and they came up with these categories of adverse child experiences, including abuse, physical, sexual, and emotional neglect, physical and emotional neglect, and then household dysfunction, which they included things like your parent is in prison, your family member has a mental illness.
So we're talking severe trauma.
Pretty severe trauma. Yeah. I mean, you'd be surprised at exceedingly high levels of very large students that are reporting.
Yeah.
I mean, real. And when the original ACEs people asked their 20,000 people, they found they're pretty common. and they cluster. So if you have one, you tend to have more than one. Right, so families that have drug addiction in the family also tend to have maybe abuse, right? So like the cluster, people tend to have multitude. If you have one, the more you have, the more you end up having, right? And they are related to like all sorts of bad things, depression, anxiety, but also smoking, eating poorly, and dying, basically. This is like a whole pyramid of how sociocultural historical factors lead to ACEs. The ACEs lead to like brain changes, which lead to psychological changes, which lead to bad behaviors, which basically leads to early death, right? So pretty dire, right? So our question for our team is, if we assess the ACEs and then we assess the psychological flexibility variables, can we see like how did the psychological flexibility variables like is it that having the adverse child experiences make you less flexible, and is the being less flexible make you anxious and depressed? So that's what my team is doing this year, and I think it's super relevant to everybody's life. Like everything you're learning in your manipulative practices class is the same stuff, right? It's that you're learning psychological flexibility, especially you're probably learning the mindfulness piece, right? Yeah. Probably focusing a lot on
it's just like hearing what you say, like there's so much that overlaps also, like this idea of like self versus like actuality and like thinking about it all. Like I know mindfulness and meditation can be so difficult because you're literally just sitting there like with your own thoughts, and like that can be a very stressful, scary thing. Right. It's supposed to bring this sense of like comfort and ease, but it's this idea of like instead of pushing out those negative feelings, like actually letting them in and like processing them for what they are.
And it can be really hard because you can sit there and meditate and be like, I'm stressed. Oh my god, I'm stressed. I'm a failing meditator.
Yeah, my first 2 minutes of my meditations are literally me sitting down being stressed about like all the things I have to do that day, and then you kind of just like, our professor has us always remind us of like when you feel yourself, he calls it slipping. Mm-hmm. Like when you feel yourself slipping, like give you that mental reminder, like the stress is there, the stress is there, but that's not what you're doing right now. That's not the point of what you're here for right now.
And not get mad at yourself for
that
having
was
the
biggest
stress,
thing.
right?
Yeah.
Like they'll be like, I failed in my mindfulness.
Yeah, we have to like keep a journal, and like the first like 10 journal entries is me literally being like, I can't sit for more than 30 seconds without my mind wandering. Like I'm so annoyed and frustrated. And he literally pulled me aside and was like, I'm reading your journal, I'm a little concerned. He was like, this isn't something that's supposed to make you frustrated. Like it's something you have to work toward.
Right. You mentioned the benefit of like them being there. Is there anything that you can tell us to like that we can use for our friends, like that we see that maybe aren't practicing the ACT? Like how?
Well, I mean, I think these metaphors of this idea of like DNAB or DNBA, right? That like there's these different parts of ourselves, and that we have to, if you see a friend who's like paralyzed or like not doing something or getting so stuck in these thoughts, you can even the terminology of like, I think your advisor. I mean, like the part of you that is like giving you lessons might be overdoing it right now. Like maybe try it.
That's like frame how you communicate.
Like to discover. Why don't we see what would happen? Like try this new thing. Like take this class, do this thing. We just I don't know. Do the thing and see what happens. It's all very useful, right? I mean, everything you've learned in your contemplative practice. I mean, you're learning mostly just to sit and like be accepted. But I think just every day, like just noticing how, trying to be present in the moment.
That's a big thing with my meditation class. He talks about this idea of like you're only really meditating. I mean, we're only sitting there for 20 minutes a day.
Right.
But he's like the most important thing you get out of meditation is not those 20 minutes a day you're actually sitting there. It's the every other minute that happens outside of those 20 minutes, and how meditation really kind of tries to reframe your mindset and like how you talk to yourself, and then that affects how you talk to others.
Exactly. So that you have this ability. I always think of it like that. I don't know why. Just the littlest bit of distance from all that chatter in your mind. Like you're not going to get rid of that chatter because we're not like Zen monks. Like the chatter is always going to be there. That language, right? Yes. But like we don't have to just like watch it. Right? And meditating, the practice of meditating. I'm personally terrible at that.
Oh, I am too.
I mean, I like say I'm going to meditate, but I like don't like actually meditate. Like I just think about meditation theoretically and try to be aware in the moment. I like to, you know, think of meditation.
It's hard.
I took yoga once and it was like
It's a total, but I still think but I still think it's important to like realize, like something I said to my normal psych class, which I thought they thought was useful, was like you don't have to believe your thoughts. Like just because you think it doesn't mean it's true.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just in and of itself like a pretty useful thing to remember, right? Just
Like
because,
mind blowing.
right? Like just because you think that it's true, and then if you think about it from the DMVA, you can say that's just your advisor, like you know, giving you bad advice. That's just like bad advice, right? Just because your brain is telling you something, you don't have to listen. You know?
It's wiring your brain to,
Yeah.
to learn that you are the board, not
You're
the
enough.
pieces.
Exactly, you're the board, and you're enough. You don't have to think certain thoughts to do certain things. Like just being the board, right? Just like you're you, and it's, sometimes you're gonna have bad things floating on there, and sometimes sometimes one side's gonna win, and sometimes, but that doesn't make you a bad person. Like you're still like you're you, and you're beyond that.